My business is directly impacted by the number that the Fed puts out there. One of the most well-run, well-known companies went under. They created a loan product with FHA where we can actually finance in the cost of a solar panel.
You have a dairy farm, landfill, or someplace that makes really dirty, nasty gas that's, harmful to the ozone, then we'll take it and clean it up and make it usable.
Well, Ted, glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me. We
were just talking before we hit record, and you're one of my close friends, man, and we met on a loan, and then our circles kind of came aligned. And
yeah, it's funny because I've known you before I knew you. Like we were talking. I remember talking to you on the back porch. I was sitting on a swing, and I was like, we're just like crunching numbers and trying to figure out how we're going to do this loan, and you just came so recommended, and I'm like, I'm going to go with this guy no matter what. But let's just talk shop, and it was one of the best decisions we ever made. So.
Yeah, well, I remember hearing your name because, and we'll get into it, but Electric Innovations, your company, you've done some incredible things here in Northern California, and you employ some great people, and you guys are on the cutting edge of some things. But so when I talked to you, I was like, oh, this is Ted Thompson, man, and are you an introvert? But would you be like? Call yourself?
Yeah, that's probably how I'd recharge. Yeah. I'd find myself by myself more often than not. Although, like anybody, most introverts, they get lonely after a little while. But my default is
public setting, and you have to talk a lot. You got to go home. And
I feel like I'm kind of a quasi introvert because it's like, yes, it's true. I get energy from larger groups. For a short period of time, and then it tends to drain. But where I get the most energy is things like this, like not necessarily by myself, but in a small group.
Yeah.
Usually after about a group of more than 3 or 4, it just gets too busy. And I don't know if I'm like on the spectrum or what, but
we all probably are.
So but that's how I get boosted up, is just, good fellowship. So
me too.
Yeah.
Well, and we're going to talk about that. So I was thinking about you the other day. Your company's Electric Innovations. You guys are involved in alternative energy. Would that be the proper way to say it?
Yeah. So simply put, we started out as Electric Innovations in 2007, and now we've rebranded as Energy Innovations because we've really expanded into more like fabrication and production of stainless steel products, but essentially taking biofuels and cleaning it up and ready for use in either a vehicle or a power generator to create electricity. So we do the systems that do that part of the system. So if you have a dairy farm or a landfill or someplace that makes really dirty, nasty gas that's, harmful to the ozone, then we'll take it and clean it up and make it usable. So
for layman's terms, you guys turn cow poop into electricity.
That's one version of it. Yes. That's how we started, and originally, and through some great connections, we just got started in that, and particularly in cow poop to electricity. But now we're looking at wastewater treatment and landfill and some other gas sources as well. So, that's a big, booming industry right now. It's the programs that are out there are quite complicated. And like, obviously, if you were to take natural gas versus the natural gas you pull out of the ground, you can't really compare, as far as you're like, well, it's so much cheaper to pull it out of, a natural gas source or a well than pulling it out of this, and then cleaning it up and making it usable from a waste. But where really the incentives are in the programs, in the programs, either federal or state.
And the motivation for this, and we'll talk, we didn't get a chance to talk about the energy. I've been learning a lot about green energy, and I'll tell you that story today. But I have to believe a big part of the motivation for this is, partly environmental, but also, and you'll probably know more about this than me, but our grid in America was created 80 years ago. And I don't think they prepared or planned on having 400 million people in America with all this illegal immigration. And so from what I understand, like it's a problem. Like our grid's a problem right now.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the major issues California particularly faces, and across the U.S. as well, in major cities, is just this increase in electric cars, and to charge an electric vehicle, it's not nothing. It's definitely an increase in usage, and so I know for me personally, I'm honestly thinking of switching to electric because of the cost of electric cars are coming down.
Yeah.
And, all this. And then I'm like, well, then I can put solar on my house and then I can power my own vehicles. Mm-hmm. And it's tempting, with the rising cost of gas and
they're cool.
And they're cool and they're getting cool looking and, the Roadster's coming out and, there's a lot of fun stuff out there to, get involved in. But yeah, the electric grid in California is definitely strained. And I do know that that's legislation. I mean, they're pushing hard and trying to, find ways to get energy. And one of the big ones is how can we do it sustainably, renewably, keep out of going into fossil fuels, power generation and or nuclear. So,
So my friend, Brian Decker, I had him on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. He's the guy that got me into becoming an affiliate through their company, but more so that we could create a mortgage product to help homebuyers or existing homeowners. And it's the same issue for a homebuyer right now in 2024 to go out and purchase a home. It's a challenge, right? Because prices didn't really drop in 23 with rates going up. Interest rates are still higher. And now we have a whole nother myriad of problems. We have insurance problems in California. If someone is buying in an area where it might be a fire zone, they have to go with a state insurance that's 4 times the cost of a typical policy, which adds to their payment. And then PG&E raised rates, which was already high, but they raised rates 38% in January. And so this group, they're called Soar Energy. They created a loan product with FHA where we can actually finance in the cost of solar panels, a battery backup system, and a new roof. And then they get to take advantage of a 30% tax credit.
Wow.
Dollar for dollar on the cost of the system that they do, which is pretty cool because it allows them to modernize the home, to get a better roof. The average age of homes in America right now, because of the lack of new construction, is 30 years.
Yeah.
So many roofs right now.
Oh, yeah.
They
easily.
have less than 5 years left on them.
Totally.
And so for someone to be able to buy a house right now and to go into a house with a zero electricity bill, it's a pretty big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. That's huge.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, that would be, that's basically a car payment right there, at least, or more, depending on where you live.
Yeah.
If you're on a ranch or something with bigger electricity usage. But even for me, it's, that's $400 or $500 a month easy, on my electric.
And you're in the city. So,
and I get a Reading electric rate. Yeah. So that's pretty good.
So there was a gal that I was talking to the other day. She lives in Palo Cedro and she was talking to me about a loan, and I asked her what her PG&E bill was. And she said last month, this would have been in January, it was $1,200.
Oh my goodness.
$1,200. And it's not July yet. That's after the rate,
Yeah.
So she doesn't have solar, and so they're definitely a great candidate for this. But Soar is pretty interesting. The guys that created this company, I think it's going to be the biggest solar company in America. They really. So he was a former owner of a mortgage company, and he just kind of looked at some of the ways things were going, and he's like, AI and green energy is really the future right now. And so his brother was one of the developers of ChatGPT. And so what they did was they developed this report. It's called a home energy assessment report. And think of it as a home inspection. So if someone has a property, they use satellite imagery with the same satellite company that the insurance companies use. So it's really frequent. I think it's every 2 weeks, it's scanning every home in America. And so it can tell if you're in a high cost utility area, and what utility company you're with, and it shows you what your bill is. So for it's something we've never had to do as an industry, but right now, giving them a home energy assessment report on any home they look at in America, it's a really awesome tool because it also shows all of the energy efficiency upgrades that they can do that are suggested by the Department of Energy. A lot of them they can do themselves by going to Lowe's, weather stripping, smart vents, smart lights, but then it shows solar, battery backup systems, and a new roof through this program called the Powered Up Network, which is essentially an alternative utility company that will put all of that on your house, $0 out of your pocket.
Yeah.
As long as you allow them to take some of the energy back. And after
Yeah.
5 years, you can buy it back
Yeah.
at whatever the value of the system is. So
Yeah.
for the average person right now that's looked at solar, it's 70 grand out of pocket, or it's a consumer loan with a high rate that just doesn't make sense. I mean, I think you were in the conversation with our friend who looked at it a year ago.
Yeah.
It's like, man, you need it, but unless you're going to live there 25 years.
Yeah. No, the payback is too far. Yeah.
It's way too far.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was pretty excited to be a part of this group.
Yeah, and that's where you're starting to see those lines being crossed, and the same thing with our industry, where when we first started out, the payback, when you get out beyond 5 years to 10 years out before you start to pay off, and the first digester we built was a 10-year payoff. Well, guess what? That just paid off. So it's like so the client is like, basically, this is just revenue, completely free and clear, and that was a bank that actually loaned on that, which was very unique. This is 10 years ago, and so. But the same thing here, where it's good to see that finally we're starting to see some of these renewable sources be actually pencil, which is like, we want that. And that's where I think it's going to really explode.
Me too.
So you said this is SOAR, S-O-A?
S-O-A-R. They're partnered with a company called Aveo out of Salt Lake.
Okay.
So I think the reason why they're doing so well is because they've got this AI report that's really good and they're using mortgage lenders and realtors, because, mortgage lenders and realtors, we have a very unique relationship with our clients.
Yeah.
Out of anyone, maybe other than your family doctor, we have my clients call me for a lot, to ask a lot of questions. And so for us to be able to find value that we can give them, it's a big deal. So they recognize that, which was really smart, because the traditional solar company, as you probably know, their model has been door-to-door sales guys, which is really expensive, and a lot of people don't really respond well to that. And then they have these exclusive agreements with these companies that are able to get those services to a homeowner that no one else can do. And then we just developed a purchase money mortgage for it. So it's pretty exciting to be with this group. Aveo in Salt Lake City, they have one of the biggest installation groups in the nation for Dish Network, and they were trying to get into solar, so they partnered, and they have JD Power and Associates Best in Class for 7 years. So it's been fun to watch, man. It's like I truly think I'm working with a company that's going to become like $1 billion company in 5 years. That's
so awesome.
Pretty fun to watch.
Wow, that's incredible.
And one of the guys that owns Aveo, lives here in Redding. He's a friend of mine. And
no way.
I didn't even know the two were connected until halfway into it. So it's another for me, it's one of those coincidences that I see all the time here in Redding with some of the things happening here.
Yeah. That'd be fun to meet him. Yeah.
John Warren. Yeah. I would like you to meet him. Yeah. He's a very smart businessman. But in the beginning before we started recording, we were talking about the season that we're in, and I was thinking about you the other day, and because you've shared with me a lot of the things you've been going after, and I our businesses aren't that different. Like we're both trying to take care of our teams, and we're, even though my business is directly impacted by the number that the Fed puts out there,
right?
Indirectly, I'm starting to see every business is finally starting to feel the impact
of that,
of the Fed raising rates 13 times. And because banks are tightening up, people are clamming up, everyone sort of has this sense of, I don't know what's going to happen, so I'm not wanting to make a big decision. And it feels like that's at the point now, first quarter of 24, where that's starting to create fear and problems for people. And so, you and I were talking about how we're redefining what winning looks like in life right now, would be the language I would use for it, and looking for the opportunities, because they may not look the same as they were a year ago or what they will be in a year, but there's still ways for us to grow and to retool ourselves. So I'd love to talk about that. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's interesting, because that's, and even in our industry, we're no different. There's, money's got to come from somewhere, right? And at the bottom line, it's either an investor or a bank, and they all want to have as best rate of return as possible. And so you have capital investments that go into developers, and we've talked to developers who then hire us to come in and build stuff, right? and their decision-making process on whether to make a project move forward is like many other people, right? Mm-hmm. It's got a pencil, it's got to make sense, but then it's also like, why put our money over here where it's more risky when I can just put it in the bank for, X amount of dollars and ride out the storm, so to speak. So, yeah, we're definitely feeling it right now. There's been a pretty good slump in our construction when we thought, hey, I think going into it, we thought there would be more support from the government agencies that started the programs, and it's been a little bit rocky on that front too. Mm-hmm. Like they just are dragging their feet on passing policies that would either clarify things, which people without clarification don't want to invest money either. Right. So it's like having a car, company, and then having government regulations coming in and saying, well, you either need to have, 6 wheels or 4 wheels. And you're like, well, which is it? I can't decide whether to go into, so it's like, so it's that kind of same thing where people are really, really pausing and holding off on the industry. So it's been a challenging season. And the question is, how do you convert that into trying to find creative ways around that? And you've been really good at that in your work in office here, but, and it's been a challenging season for us, to be honest with you, because we're having to do a little bit of both. And I don't think I've talked to dozens of businesses that are in the same position where they're trying to be like, hey, we got to get out there and hustle and grind and go after, whatever we can. And then we are also having to trim and make, wise decisions on how to plan. And right now we're just looking at a year. We used to look at like 6-month forecasts, and now we're looking at a year forecast, trying to be like, okay, what if this lasts another year, and then it's like, it very well could. And if anything, it could go into the middle of 2025, and then you're like, well, what about that? And so you start to shift your focus from, going full gangbusters to more of a tiered approach of like what scenarios and doomsday scenarios or whatever you want to call it. Like what's my strategy for weathering the storm, so to speak. And that's a very different level of business that, when we started in 2007, that was a rough time to start a business. But then we've been growing, we've been having, it's much easier to make decisions when you've got good cash flow, right?
Yeah.
So when things are getting tighter, you're having to make a whole different set of decisions. And so,
and that's hitting right now. One of the best ran mortgage companies in the nation went out of business last week, and up into this point, and I'm sure it's no different for what you're doing. Up into this point, the companies that had gone under were kind of the ones you expected, right? And so, in any industry, you've got your top tier players,
right?
And then you've got everybody else. And it's like, they're the first ones to go. And last week, like one of the most well-run, well-known companies went under. And in my industry, they were so capitalized because of the pandemic time, and that I think just so many people have been able to hang on a lot longer without hitting the panic button. But I just think this year, people are starting to kind of think, if this, then what, and what you're describing. And what I would love to talk about with you is, because this is what we're talking about is for businesses, and it's two completely different industries, but this is true for families too.
Yeah.
You have a micro version of the same exact problem we're talking about, where we're going into a very unknown economy. Things are tight. Inflation's real. You've got mouths to feed. You're taking care of people.
Yeah.
And if you're not careful, you can really succumb to fear. And that always leads to, nothing good. And so what are some of the things that you've done to stay, positive, to lead your team, to stay healthy, and to stay in the fight?
Yeah, that's a great question. I honestly, I'll find myself in the process of feeling like I'm healthy, find myself slipping backwards in the middle of it. But it's definitely a challenge to keep a positive attitude. And my wife has been incredible, with that. And obviously going into business, We did a decent amount of research on what this might mean, and when you start something from scratch, you feel, you're eating rice and beans and you're doing whatever it takes, right, to get it off the ground. Yeah. You're sleeping on the factory floor, so to speak. And so it's like, hey, when this is coming around, nobody likes to feel that feeling again, but it isn't our first go around, which is definitely helpful. But I would say, obviously, I think there's a certain amount of, taking care of yourself. You gotta really prioritize. I think that having, been blessed with some decisions that we made, making sure we didn't go over the top when things were good and put money aside is super smart. So, a lot of real estate that we've bought into is now helping us pay the bills, so. And I'm not saying that everybody gets that opportunity, but it is something to think about if you're in a position that is good, to make sure that you are putting money aside into a diversified portfolio. And I'll be the first to testify that was probably the smartest thing that, God showed me to do this. And I'm like, hey, what? I need to put some money over here in this other area because I don't know what's going to happen over here. Yeah. And I don't think anybody's really immune from going over the edge or from cracking, right? Like, and I'm one of them. I do think I feel a ton of peace when my wife and I are connected, when I'm connected with my family, because I feel like then I can pull out of whatever storms, whatever I need to sell asset wise, whatever I need to, if I need to sell my car and, take a bike, like I honestly am like, hey, but my family, my wife, my kids, the people that love me, that trust, that are there, I'm fathering well, I'm husbanding well, I'm showing up, I'm present, I'm going to my kid's soccer game. Those are the things you'll never regret, no matter what happens. And so I think that building your life around those people is always smart. And that's not easy to do, because when things are rough, you're like, it's 6 a.m. I want to go to the office and I won't be back until, 8 or 9 at night. And I used to do that.
Yep.
And my wife is gracious enough to know, like, hey, you need to grind, stay late, just go for it, but that comes from equity that I've built.
Right.
You're pulling from that.
Totally. Yeah, no, that's good. So I heard you say reserves, passive income have been key. And then also staying connected to the people you love. Yeah. And those are two incredible.
And a good group of guys around you, that somebody you can call and be like, because my wife can't take all of it, right? She can't take all that burden.
Right.
So, for years she did actually, she'd be the person I would call. And then recently, I think the last year or two, she's like, I can't be your person to talk to about this stuff. Like, it's just too heavy on me. So, share with me, be open, obviously we want to have honesty, but at the same time, you need people around you. And that's when really kind of jumped in with a group of guys that has been helpful. Yeah. To be like, hey guys.
It's been so helpful. It's been life-changing.
It's been incredible.
Yes. So I think that, what I see right now in my industry, and I think I've done this as good as I could, but I definitely have struggled. It's been, I've paid the cost of running things, and I haven't laid one person off. My industry's laid tons of people off, and organically we've had some things kind of happen that's worked out. Thank God for that.
Some natural correction. Yeah, you'll see some of that.
Totally. But I met with my friend recently, and this was last year when we were starting to see the shift, and I kind of knew it was coming. And that's when I transitioned into this new company, Mortgage One. And I was like, hey, what should I do? And I was like, I got a big building. I was like, should I downsize? I was open to anything. And he was like, no, I would keep the building, and because you don't want to cap your vision, you need the space. And it was around that time Ahab's like, hey, are you renting an office? Would you rent me an office? And another guy said, hey, would you rent me an office? I didn't even ask. And all of a sudden I have 3 people that are taking some of the space.
So smart. Yeah.
Well, it just happened for me.
Yeah.
I wish I could say I was smart. It was honestly.
Well, it helps to have a great space like this that people want to be here. Yeah. It's like, but But if I had one thing that I would look back and do over again, I probably would have been like, hey, let's make some moves a little faster. Because I think that you hit a certain checkpoint, and then there's the rule of being at a casino, right? There's just something about the psychologically with the human brain where you roll 3 6s in a row, you think that the next one's going to be a 6. And so you kind of bank on that instead of looking at, we should probably be making those trims and thinking lean and just like, and some of it, I mean, even right now we're diving into another round of like, where can we cut? And we're still finding some things that we're like, we don't need that truck, it seems cheap, but in reality, we don't need that truck either. We don't need the truck. We don't need that infrastructure anymore. It was part of an old, system. And so I think we're going to go to once a quarter really deep dives, and you just got to get more frequent and be careful with how your money's, because a dollar saved is $1.50 earned,
what's really cool too is when those contracts free up and when those legislations pass, what we've learned during this season, we will never lose it again.
We'll never forget this. That's something that
will change our lives forever, man. I will never waste money. The way that I did.
We'll be so much smarter.
There is no reason to. I don't care how much money we're bringing in. I will not squander money, because I've learned so much when things get leaner and I think that's what people have to do at home, and I know a lot of people are doing that. And the other thing I would say, because I met with some of our friends this morning trying to help them with their situation, and a budget's only going to take you so far, right? It's like, it definitely will help you have some peace, because what your break even is, whether that's at home or you're a business owner. But you also have to figure out how to get on the offense and what are the strategies to create revenue. And I think right now it seems like a lot of it is just base hits. I mean, we're always looking for those home runs, but the base hits are keeping the lights on for a lot of people I know right now.
The consistency, keeping that base level of income. It may be one of those things. I talk to people come in all the time that are like, hey, what would you advise? I'm trying to start a business. And I'm like, they're like, I'm thinking about, renting a space and, quitting my other job and going after this endeavor. And I'm like, it's a good business idea, but don't quit your day job until you get this one up. You're going to have to hustle. You have to work late at night. You're going to have to work out of your garage, and then your overhead is so much cheaper. Much better recipe for success than just, and then your odds of failing are way lower if you're doing that, right? Just because you're setting yourself up with very little overhead
expenses. Look up pictures of Jeff Bezos and what's the guy, Apple, I'm drawing blank.
Jobs,
Steve Jobs, and the old pictures, like
Michael Dell,
they're both in their garages.
That's a clue. I think it was Michael Dell.
That's a clue. They're in the garages.
Right. The circuits, making circuit boards and all that. Yeah, it's true. So starting small and working your way up there. But I mean, being creative, I think that the space of being super creative in ways to make money is it's challenging. I know we're also looking at other streams outside of our industry, just because and biogas is very specific, and there's only so many players in it. And at some point, we're still going to go hard in there, but we're also looking at, we have an electrical division as well, and so we're actually doing some work for high speed rail down in the valley. We're doing anything we can. It's like, hey, let's diversify. It's not normally what we go after, but it's like, hey, this opportunity fell on our laps. I'm not going to turn it down. It's not a huge contract, but it's sizable, and it's going to keep us going. And so I'm actually going down next week to try to supervise the final part of that project. But I think diversification and like, okay, what other skills do I have that I could potentially, tap into that I haven't really thought of, or what other, can I rent a room of my house out, or can I, start up a small Airbnb or rent my trailer out?
I don't need 2 kidneys.
I don't need 2 kidneys. You're right. One of them isn't even needed anymore. You don't even drink, so there you go. You don't even need it. But
well, there's some good tactics here for the listeners, whether it's a family or we have a lot of people that have business that are doing startups right now. I think what we'll close with is the last piece is looking for harmonious verticals of income. Like for me as a mortgage lender, it makes no sense for me to go buy a plumbing company. It's gonna come at the expense of this going down. So, but if it's in your lane,
your natural gifting,
your natural
passion
gifting,
for it.
And you already have the capacity, the people. Those are really good opportunities. The other thing you were saying is just managing yourself personally, your spirit, your soul, your body. I happen to know you work out, you're connected to friends, you and your family are very connected, and that keeps you from falling into fear.
Yep.
Because that's never going to help going through seasons like that.
And seek counsel, seek friends, seek people that care about you. Sometimes if you look up, pull your head up a little bit, you're like, oh yeah, there's actually a lot of people that care about me.
Yeah.
You're not alone. You got what it takes, and just push through. Grit it's not something you just read about. It's born through adversity.
Yep.
And through tough, you've been through so many seasons in your past. There's a reason you're where you are right now.
True. It's true for both of us.
It
doesn't mean that it's easy when we go through it again.
No.
That's the lie, is like, just because.
No, it's not, but it is a little bit easier.
It's a little easier.
You're a little more, and it's all about risk management and risk tolerance. Like, how much are you really wanting to risk? And I'll be honest, right now, I'm like, I want to risk as much as I possibly can. I kind of went through a season, I'm in a season right now. I'm like, I want to risk as much as I can, because I'd always look back and wonder, what if I hadn't?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to be that person. I don't look at 10 years from now, Ted, and be like, but what if I had? But now I made the choice, and I got the risk, and now I'm battling through it. And so, but I'm bought in.
Yep.
I have buy-in.
Yep.
So I would say, anybody listening, keep at it, keep grinding, go after it. This will turn around, and we're going to pull out of this.
Yeah. So in closing here, thanks, Ted. I appreciate you having a conversation here. I think people will get a lot out of this. A couple things, I'll just put some links in our description, but Ted and I have been radically changed through Braveco, and we've got a conference coming up in June. So if you're a man who's wanting to get connected with men that are going after big things, and you feel alone, you don't have to be. So we would love to see you there. For anyone that has questions around the real estate or the investment stuff that Ted brought up, you can also ask questions about that. That's what I do. I would love to talk to you. Other than that, we really appreciate you. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and comment, and we'll see you next time.